Furthermore, in the chapter pertaining to the awareness of women in women-related laws in regional rural areas of Maharashtra, my chapter on this particular topic relates to the 1995 country report for the Fourth World Conference of Women in Beijing. Now, here the topic which was discussed was Maharashtra's the best practices among responses to domestic violence. Yes. Um, so the Beijing Fourth World Conference, the Indian government identified violence against women as one of the 11 main issues of concern. This is a huge improvement from the historic 1975 Status of Women in India report, which did not even cover violence as a chapter. Now, here, however, women in however, there are few concrete estimates of the scale of violence in India here too. Now, the number of cases of violence against women recorded to the police under the legal categories of cruelty, torture, dowry, and dowry killing provides only a sliver of the problem. So, it is like torture and cruelty by husbands and in-laws were the most common type of crime against women in 1995, accordingly accounting for 29% of all the recorded incidents. Now, furthermore, from 21,106 in 1991 to 36,219, very important over here, that is 219. 1995, the number of reports had increased considerably. To address the epidemic of domestic violence, concerned actions from the government and the NGOs were taken. Yes, now we will be doing the different roles of all these very important institutions which assist the mm, we can say the curbing of this particular violence aspect. Now here that is, however, there are few studies that describe and evaluate existing domestic violence responses. To fill this gap, the Women's Studies Unit at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, they conducted a study on institutional responses to domestic abuse in 1997-98. When looking into the national figures, it's worth noting that the two states of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra accounted for, yes, a large number, that is 29.7% of all registered crime against women. Furthermore, Maharashtra has the highest number of cases of abuse and cruelty, even intimate partner violence. Now, intervention by the government and NGO, a thorough assessment of the breakthrough of responses to domestic abuse demonstrates inventiveness and concerns on the part of both the government and the non-governmental sector to address the problem of domestic violence. As it is, we are defined as its physical, emotional, sexual, financial abuse against an adult woman in the household for the purpose of the study. Also, the scope of the study includes both government and NGO response to domestic abuse and the judicial responses such as legal aid cells, family courts, and women's courts. Now here that is police responses such as all women police station, police counseling cells, so special cells maintained by NGOs within the police stations, and community policing initiatives. We have responses such as shelter home, counseling cell, and yes, a few innovative local experiments. Now, NGO reactions range from providing alternative shelter, counseling, very important, community mobilization. Yes, nowadays this is pertinent to note that community mobilization, education and awareness campaign and campaigning. Here we need to stress upon the fact the state intervention. Now, the prevention and the prohibition of this particular abuse, that is domestic abuse, and passage of many amendments to address dowry harassment and dowry debt have been the most significant state measures. Other steps have been included efforts to improve women's access to the legal services. As a result of all this, we have the legal aid cell, family court, Lok Adalat, People's Court, and yes, Mahila Lok Adalat. Women courts have been established. You can see in most of the part of my research in Maharashtra, meeting various women organization, and yes, the people who are into serving this arena of crimes against women, that is counseling cells, refugee homes, have been among the various state intervention to handle the extra needs of revenue production and employment. Some states established district level initiatives. Now, intervenes by NGO, various organizations take diverse position on women concern from an ideological standpoint. Yes, it's very important to note here their knowledge and activism on topics such as poverty, casteism, illiteracy, and alcoholism informs their views on domestic violence. Now, NGO approaches, on the other hand, have endeavored to meet both the practice and strategic concern of women. Here, I would like to stress upon the fact while some organizations have actively reached on out to affected women with legal and family interventions. Yes, alternative shelter and economic programs that provide income generated programs. Many others have included doing so. So women are empowered through education, legal awareness, asset development, and mobilization of powerful women's groups by organization that grasp the structural roots of domestic violence. Yes, here one more aspect is street plays, that is street plays, exhibitions, mass assemblies, organization, older ladies to greet every new marriage to the hamlet, and mock funeral position publicizing violence are all examples of innovative ways to raise community awareness and support. The NGO community has attempted to demolish the notion of the problem's private character by striving to make domestic abuse a part of public conversation. The spread of NGO activities, particularly in Maharashtra, yes, into varied socioeconomic groups, including the upper and middle class, which have been mainly invisible as state service seekers, has been a key aspect of improvement. Now, given the restricted options available to Indian women outside marriage, the NGO community has frequently prioritized reconciliation when addressing the needs of women who have been abused. Yes, now there are still few viable options for long-term shelter, and yes, building this at individual economic potential. There have also been successful collaborations between public and private sector, coordination between the police and the NGO, very important over here. They operate out of the police station as well as counseling cells or in the police stations. This partnership as combines important NGO expertise with state funding to provide more sensitive and professional services to the female victims. Yeah, very important over here. Although the collaboration can limit the agenda setting and operations flexibility, it can also inject sometimes conservative government system with more innovative NGO leadership. Yeah, now responses to domestic violence, a close examination. Here, in general, the goal of the study is to figure out what factors are important for establishing an effective response to domestic abuse. Here, the perspective and approach to abuse, the breadth of services given, and the quality of these services are all examples of such issues. An examination of these parameters in connection to specific intervention option follows. Overall, it applies that the number of state and non-government interventions don't provide that provide both immediate and short-term supportive services is greater than those that provide long-term preventive services. According to the findings, the vast majority of initiatives are targeted solely on women. Now, when we see in the judicial and legal responses, yes, very important, which I have put up over here, that is, domestic violence responses are most influenced by the state perspective and strategy. Here, the majority of official intervention attempt to mediate solutions to these problem of violence that do not result in marital breakup. Yes, this very important. The Mahila Dakshata Samiti, Women's Advisory Board, Police Counseling Cells, All Women Police Station, Family Courts, legal aid boards are examples of state initiatives. Now, the overreaching goal of each of this initiative is to identify and resolve the immediate difficulties within the marital home. The trend is driven in part by the fact that many women may not want to dissolve their marriage, and in part by the government's belief that marriage is an inviolable institution that must be perpetuated. Now, here the judicial, yes, a very, very important aspect is this particular domestic abuse has been addressed by the Indian government with many legislative changes during the previous decade. Now, the majority of the modifications refer to dowry harassment, dowry fatalities. Yes, a very important, prominent to note over here is the dowry fatalities. Yes. In as examples of domestic abuse. So section 498 it in particular has been revolutionary in exposing the criminal character of mental and physical violence committed by the spouse or his relatives. This is an amendment in the law for reasons other than unlawful demand. Now, yes, because of the instant consequences, it is seen to have a great deterrent value. Domestic abuse is classified as cognizable offense under section 498A, which implies that the accused can be detained without a warrant. Yes, the accused in all these cases can be detained without a warrant. Now, as a result, it assists to prevent the abuser from harming the woman. When we talk about it also offers the woman a bargaining power to find a solution to a predicament. Yes. Now here it is stated that while the willful woman, yes, abuse this legal protection to exact revenge on their husbands and in-laws. Furthermore, because of the potential for harm to the husband's family, police officers are cautious to file complaints under the clause. It often happens that in some of our cases where yes, false complaints are lodged. So there are also some practical limitations to using section 498 to seek redressal of grievances. Now here the complainant's chances of that is gaining access to a marital residence after filing a case are very slim to none. Women without alternative housing or financial support are unable to utilize this choice. The husband's family frequently suggests dropping the case as a condition for a quick divorce. Now, conviction rates under the legislation sections are extremely low as a result of these and other circumstances, like when both the parties come to a mutual consent. So these are some of the limitations for the 498A and plus the dowry. Now, only 2.2% of the cases brought under 498A between 1990 and 1996, that is in one district of Maharashtra, Yavatmal, ended in conviction. Very important to note over here. Only one ended in conviction. According to the analysis of court ruling, section 498 is substantial deterrent significance must be acknowledged in any discussion of legal practices, best practices. One of the most critical steps in moving the subject of domestic abuse from the private to the public domain is to emphasize its criminal nature rather than depicting it solely as a family problem. It's less receptive to legal intervention when it is kept inside a family, and also hinder women from seeking help. Yes, very important over here is the state's judicial and executive branches are legal bodies and authorities to prosecute and punish the offenders by their very nature. So domestic violence should be prevented by the utilizing the law's breadth. The Indian government has compelled to respond with genuine and meaningful legal solutions to address domestic abuse, because it's a signatory to the covenant of the elimination convention for the that's a CIDA of the convention on the elimination of discrimination against the women. Other judicial initiatives such as Lok Adalat and the Mahila Lok Adalat courts are limited by the lack of punitive authority. As a result, these entities primarily serve as a contributory mechanism. It just serves as a contributory mechanism, relying solely on mediation and counseling. Yes, it's very important to note here. This brings the disputing parties to often an agreement. According to key informant interviews, they do not efficiently perform their objective even as conciliation measures. While therapy has the place in the treatment of marital discord, it may not be sufficient in all cases of violence. As a result, the state's undue reliance on it must be examined more closely. Coming to law enforcement, this is also a very important aspect of research, that is law enforcement. The formation of all women police stations by the state as a significant step forward to attempts and increasing reporting of crimes against women and more sensitive treatment of such cases. These stations are extremely valuable in terms of making police services more accessible to the women, and India is one of the only countries where such an effort has been undertaken consistently. Now, when we talk about such interventions, it may have been tailored to a certain region's socio-cultural setting, which helps to explain why the women police stations are needed in states like Madhya Pradesh, where women are wary of approaching, the male police officers. Now, these all women police stations, on the other hand, are considered as gimmick and have serious flaws. The police system established male bias against women's skills, prohibits female employees and complainants from fully enlisting the stations. Female officers are viewed as physically incapable of warfare. Personal infrastructure support and cooperation are lacking as the statutes. The Mahila police thanas in Madhya Pradesh, for example, are not operating at full personal level, according to the report. We'll be seeing the latest report in my last chapters. There are little opportunities for skill development and training. Furthermore, because there's a little interaction between mainstream police officers and women working in Mahila police thana, exposure to other phases of policing is limited. This is, later used against police women in promotional decisions. Both male and female officers appear to view Mahila police station as punishment assignments outside the scope of actual police activity. Furthermore, the implied pressure to file all complaints involving women with AWPS only complicates matters for women who may be unable to travel considerable distances and denies from the ability to seek redressal normal police stations. Very important over here. It is unlikely that police stations will become more efficient in processing domestic abuse crimes just because more women have been recruited. without sufficient training and and sensitization. The Mahila police thanas are an example of an inventive approach that failed owing to a lack of more comprehensive police to help with execution of that particular case, whichever comes to them. Now, services to assist. Since state police staffing and budget decisions all have a significant impact on the creation and sustainability of extensive supportive services for domestic abuse victims. Over here, alternative shelters, childcare facilities, counseling, economic generation projects, education programs are examples of services, despite the fact that numerous NGO groups provide various forms of assistance to women. They are nevertheless influenced by state financing and goals. The provisions of alternative shelter through short stay homes, typically in collaboration with the voluntary sector, has been one of the more significant short-term welfare responses of the state to domestic abuse. However, there are some disadvantages to how these households operate. According to research, despite a combined capacity of 370 that is inhabitants, only 112 women use shelter services in 7 of the shelter facilities evaluated in Madhya Pradesh. The quantity and age of dependents as well as the movement of inhabitants are frequently restricted in government run shelter homes, which are often seen as shelter for a woman and a dependents. The atmosphere is often one of severe policing, which is not favorable to women's recovery from emotional trauma caused by her family in-laws. Although state-sponsored shelters run by non-profit organizations are less restrictive, there are still limited childcare options, forcing working women to take their children with them or to make separate arrangements. Very important over here. Crèche facilities are not given proper response. However, it appears that the state priority shelter homes and other supportive services over immediate therapy. For example, only 0.3% of the overall expenditure of the central program social welfare board, especially in Madhya Pradesh, was put aside for shelter home maintenance in 97, whereas 6.9% of the funds was set aside for counseling services. Now, efforts to improve women's health. Aside from the reluctance to engage early, there are few techniques that addresses women's trauma or assist them to restore their lives and self-esteem. Psychological and medical services and facilities, for example, are non-existent in both areas. Treatment that concentrates on the physical rather than the emotional and therapeutic rejuvenation of the woman's sense of self is found to be of minimal benefit in strengthening her sense of self, and such therapeutic counseling is almost non-existent. As a result, psychological concerns concerning a woman's worries of additional violence, uh, conflicts she may be facing about staying with the abuser, concern for her children, and her own self identity are usually ignored. This type of more extensive attention to her needs is just not on the agenda of most of the state sponsored counseling cells, nor are there counselors who are experienced or equipped to help her counselors opportunities to improve their abilities through regular training and to network with other professionals are for the most part restricted. It should be highlighted that social work education and yes, training do not always include specialist inputs in women's counseling. Furthermore, neither the government nor the non-governmental sector has adequately addressed the need for the immediate and effective medical control. Here, apart from initial mandatory health checkup to rule out any diseases, women in state run shelter homes, for example, are unable to go to a civil hospital for health problems unless there are emergency due to a shortage of transportation and severe mobility limitation. Mental health services are also inadequate. Some shelter considers medical examinations to be only required for the inhabitants' gynecological and moral health. Yes. According to the report, one shelter home caretaker happily confessed that she personally checks whether the girls are having their periods. So next video we will be doing upon the preventive services, especially in Maharashtra, and how it is choosing the best practices, so that this matter can be solved and doesn't go to heights. So yes, the criminalizing domestic abuse, promoting a holistic approach, then coordinating the responses. Of course, I will be also doing gender must be integrated into community, state, and development paradigms in my next video.